I'm Emma Louise Coffey, and you're welcome to The Dairy Edge, the Teagasc Dairy podcast. We're bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve dairy farm performance. On part 2 of our interview with Micheal O'Donovan and Tomas Tubritt, they take us through the reseeding process step by step. Firstly, Micheal explains where to start the process.
Well, the first thing you start is highlighting the paddock that you want to take out, and that has to be done, and some farmers are very good at that because they're measuring, and some farmers are not so good at it. But ultimately, that's the first process, and obviously in the grazing platform, all the paddocks close to the parlour should be productive. I know some guys keep them as lame cow paddocks and all that, but the grazing platform paddocks, especially close to the parlour, they should be all highly productive paddocks. So then once you have the paddock that you want to reseed in your head, it's when you're going to do it. And obviously then, once you've made that choice, you're going to spray it off, Roundup. Are you going to use farmyard manure like here in Moore Park? Our farm manager John Paul Murphy will always use the spring reseed to take out the farmyard manure from the calf sheds and the calving boxes, and we'll use that as to build up organic matter in those. Like we use it as a way of building organic matter in the soils. And now our soil organic matter, which is the higher the organic matter, it's important for us. Is the higher the organic matter of the soil, the more soil nitrogen it is releasing, and that's important for us once we have high pH there. So you're looking at get the farmyard manure out in it, and then what is the technique that you're going to use then to reseed.
And we'll take it up with you there, Tomas. What are the main methods we're using in Ireland, and are some favourable over others?
Yeah, so we have ploughing. You would disc, or you could try stitching it in. Each method has been shown, creating the study in this as well, where there's no difference in the establishment of whatever method you use, as long as the method is done correctly. So it's just after that then it's preference. So you mightn't be, if the land hasn't been tilled in a while, you might be inclined to plough because you just end up picking stones. Some people just might rather a completely new seed bed with less trash on them. So they might like to plough, but they're just going to open themselves up for stones. People who no time for stones, they'll opt to disc. So they'll disc it one way and then disc it the second time at a different angle. Then hopefully a lot of the surface trash will be broken up by the discs, then go into the one-pass system, and you should have a fine reseed there as well.
Micheal mentioned there that there's a 60-day turnaround, for reseeding. Does that vary across methods? Will ploughing lead to a longer turnaround time?
No, it'll be more down to the actual management of the reseeding and the weather that you get thereafter. So the ploughing now might be a bit more susceptible. Grazing later on, it might be a bit more inclined to be poached as there's new fresher soil been brought up, but generally turnaround time wouldn't be so different.
And back to you, Micheal, talking about soil fertility, say for argument's sake I'm doing a soil test once every 3 years, so I'm in year 3 of that cycle. I have probably a low indication of what the soil fertility is in a particular paddock. What should I do there?
Ideally, when you invert the soil, you should take a soil test. Because historical soil tests are what they are, historical. And ultimately in a new reseed, you're inverting soil, especially when you're ploughing. When you plough, that's when you do the soil test, and go to the Teagasc office, borrow the soil sampler, and do a soil test if you're ploughing. Minimal cultivation is a bit more straightforward. You're up in the top 4 inches of soil, so the soil test there. You should still really be doing a soil test, on your new reseeds, because we see now, looking at soil tests, I was looking at soil tests last night, a pile of dairy farms are low in K. And, a new reseed will suffer with low P, low K and low pH. So, obviously when you're spending €700 or €750 a hectare, you want to give these swards as much of a chance as you possibly can to produce and perform and get to their potential.
And I suppose, right, not ignoring that advice, but we have farmers and they're not going to do that. What is the standard fertiliser plan for reseed?
Well, you're probably looking at probably 3 to 4 bags of 10, 10, 20. That's just that is the standard. That is the standard application rate at reseeding. So like some lads will use can and then they'll fill up with 0730. I wouldn't be mad for putting slurry out on reseeds. Sometimes slurry can get it can go out excessive, and the next thing it leads to caking of the soil. Which we've seen some ponding on farms with that. So if you're putting out slurry, it does need to go out quite light.
And then in terms of lime, is there a role for lime at reseeding?
Well, there probably is, and obviously when the soil is, when you have open soil, that you're getting, lime to soil contact early, and you're getting a better breakdown of lime when you have cultivated soil. So obviously, that process of increasing pH will be helped when you have cultivated soil. So yeah, the standard 2 ton of lime is probably a lot. We've seen huge efforts that we have to compliment farmers for as regards lifting pH of soils. But yeah, when you're reseeding, it's probably time to it's time to look at the pH of the soil. Like the one thing I'd say when reseeding is the process is fine, but a lot of fellas actually underestimate the use of rolling in reseeds. If a reseed isn't rolled, we see it getting very, very loose. If it gets loose, tillers start being pulled, and in many cases we see sods being pulled out of swards that haven't been rolled. So rolling is one of the crucial things. It's a very simple thing, but it's a very important aspect of getting seed to soil contact down in that lower layer, but also making sure that a reseed doesn't get desiccated from if it gets dry after. You've seen many reseeds last in the early part of the drought last year. Those ones that were well rolled, they germinated and they came through. So like rolling, we can't underestimate the importance of it. And like Tomas spoke about, what you call it, seed bed, the seed bed and the seed bed establishment. If the seed bed is fluffy, the seed goes down through. You're going to lose tillers. You're not going to get their establishment. If the seed bed has to be so fine and firm, and we use I suppose our mantra is if you can cycle across it and the front wheel of the bike is just indented on the reseed, well, that's firm. If it's going through it and it's like butter, well then your seedbed is too fluffy, and like some guys like it too fluffy, the seed doesn't like it too fluffy. It has to be firm.
After sowing a very fluffy seedbed, very heavy shower rain, it'll start to cake on top, and that could impede the actual varieties coming up out of the soil as well. So yeah, firm and fine is the way to go.
And moving on then, I suppose, to your particular area of expertise, Tomas, the selection of a suitable seed for your farm.
Yeah. So the main question you need to ask yourself is what the field is going to be used for. So on your milking platform, it's going to be predominantly grazed. You will select varieties with good grazing traits. If it's on an out farm, it's going to be used for silage. You're going to select for silage traits. And if you have mixed, you'll select for maybe high quality and with silage traits. So Teagasc have developed a pasture profit index, and we have evaluated the varieties based on these individual traits for the varieties. The traits are spring growth, summer growth and autumn growth. That's dry matter. We have a quality index, we have a silage index, and we have a persistency index. The persistency index just refers to how long the variety is expected to last within the field. So most varieties are expected to last 12 years, figures with minus figures. So there's we have a -5 and a -11. So the -5 will last probably 11 and a half, and the -11 will last 11 years. So not much difference really in there, especially if you're receiving 10% of your platform every year. So then what we're looking, each variety is ranked in a monetary term. But so it's just the higher the value, the better that variety is performed for that trait. So if we're going to pick for a grazing, on the grazing platform, you want a variety with high quality, because this will encourage animals to graze it later into the mid-season and maintain milk yields. And we also would like a good seasonal growth rate, so good spring growth and good autumn growth. We'd also be looking at the heading date when we're sowing these, so we would like them to have kind of maybe 3 to 4 to 5 days between their heading dates. And then what my research has been focused on is looking at grazing as an actual trait between varieties. So we're calling this grazing efficiency. And what we're finding is that tetraploids are generally better grazed by dairy cows relative to diploids. And we're after finding the reason for this is kind of a greater leaf area within the sward, and also greater levels of OMD. So this is related to better graze out, and we're also finding that the more open growth structure of these tetraploids is more conducive to grazing by animals as such. So then, if you're going to be choosing for your silage swards, what you'll be focusing on is the silage index within the PPI. So each varieties, the higher the value for silage, the more suited that variety is to for a silage system. So you'd be looking at varieties like Fintona or Myra, varieties like that. I'd probably go with a 50-50 mix of tetraploid to diploid for a silage mix, and for a grazing mix, pushing the tetraploid diploid mixture to maybe 60% tetraploid, 40% diploid, because we've had farmers on our monoculture trials who have sown 100% tetraploids within their swards, and they find no problems with them. The cows go in, graze them, heads are down. Once it's grazed, heads are up, and the cows are gone.
And to pick up on a few things that you mentioned there, in terms of the good seasonal production, I mean, we can all grow grass in the summertime. And, Michael made reference to, the farmers who are measuring regularly. We can see that they grew on average 1.4 tonne this spring versus, some farmers who are growing maybe half a tonne. Obviously when we're selecting on the PPI, we can drive spring growth and autumn growth. Is there a much higher weighting on the say growing in spring and autumn when we compare it to the summer?
Yes. So as I said, each value is a monetary value, and the breakdown of it is that the spring grass will have a monetary value of 16 cent per kilogram grown, and autumn will have 11% per kilogram grown, whereas in summer, like you said, any sward can grow in summer. Any kilograms of dry matter grown within summer is only worth 4 cent. And also within the relative breakdown of the PPI, so for each trait it's broken down, each contributing more to the actual overall index. Spring yield is worth 15% of that, and autumn yield is worth about 10% of that, whereas mid-season yield 5.5%.
So just to, I suppose, re-emphasise that, you're talking 16 cent for your kilo of grass in the springtime versus 4 cent in the summer. So that spring grass is worth 4 times more within the index. It's really, really interesting. And I suppose the grazing efficiency, that's a new thing that I haven't heard of. So, you're just looking at the physical trait, I guess, of the tetraploid, more leaf. It's more open, so it's easier to actually, I suppose, get through the grass when we're looking at the cow.
Yeah, and we're hoping to put that into the PPI into the future.
And then if we just, I suppose, another few things that, again, you'd hear when you chat about reseeding, I just use my co-op mix. Is that an opportunity lost if you just say pick up whatever's sitting there, or should you be more selective and say, for argument's sake, I'm looking at the PPI here, should I have a mix of, say, my Abergain and my Aberclyde? Is there an opportunity lost where you're just picking up the bag in the co-op?
There is, but many of the co-op mixes are perfectly good and could have great varieties in them, but it's just down to the farmer to be aware of what varieties are within the mix. So I know Dairy Goat have a mix and Kerry Goat have a mix of Abergain, Aberchoice and Drumbo, and that's a very good mix. Abergain is the highest PPI variety on the 2019 list, and Aberchoice isn't far behind, it's about 5th or 6th. So they are two very good varieties in your mix. It's just when you're getting down towards the lower end of the PPI, these varieties have probably been on the list for maybe 10-12 years. They're getting outclassed by the newer varieties, and you maybe just want to limit the amount of varieties within the mix, or the proportion of that variety within the mix. You'd also, as I was saying, you'd want to be looking at the type of variety for your system. So there's no point putting your silage, a good silage variety like Fintona, into your grazing mix. It might be high in the PPI, but it's not focused for the grazing system, and therefore it won't perform to its maximum.
And I suppose, Michael, if we consider then some people are very afraid of using a monoculture. And, if that doesn't work, the whole field is gone, or, it'll be too open and there'll be nothing to kind of fill in the gaps. What would you say for that kind of a comment?
I think as a grass seed industry, we with the PPI we've come forward a long way since its in inception, and the co-ops, in fairness, and the independent merchants, they have been very responsible in how they've approached their mixture construction, and like we see, like we are really happy that we see the better varieties coming through now, and 80% of the varieties, or 20% of the varieties are probably have probably 80% of the market, and like if you look at bull lists, it's probably the same thing, and like they're up the top because of their merit. And you look at the on-farm study, very much in agreement with what the PPI is saying. So we're really happy with the way mixtures are constructed in Ireland, and we're lucky that we have responsible co-ops and independent merchants who react to what the research is saying. As regards monocultures, like we've 120 farms on the cultivar evaluation study. We've used that study to get the commercial phenotypic performance of varieties, and we see that some of those, and like as Thomas has said, it has informed us that tetraploids are working well on farms. What I would say to farmers, if they wanted to go down the monoculture route, you're accepting in tetraploids, you're accepting a more open sward, and you need to get used to that. You won't have the density that you probably are used to with straight diploids, or even 30-70 mix of diploids to tetraploid, and that's a change for farmers. It might be a lot more appetising for his cows, and it will be, but it's a change for how you look at a sward. And for us, monocultures have worked. The farmers that have them have adapted their management to them. Again, if you go back to the meeting last week on John's farm, he's down at 16-17 days rotation. So you need to be flexible as regards how you approach this. And if you're not going to change to that, well, then some of these more productive monocultures are probably not for you, and they may cause you more trouble than you want. So you do have to have an approach that's going to be flexible as regards manage them. And we can see from the cultivar study, very, very good acceptance of them, and probably a move now towards a lot more usage of tetraploids, and a lot more usage and a drive on the breeders. Now the pressure is coming on us as breeders and as evaluators that higher quality varieties are what the system want. Higher quality varieties, more productive, and persistency in the PPI. You can see that there's not much difference between a lot of those varieties. So we can say that those perennial ryegrass cultivar varieties in Ireland are pretty persistent.
And Tomas, the inclusion of clover in these swards, would it be of benefit to farmers?
Yes, definitely. Some farmers, they're just not so fond of clover. They've been maybe sown in the past, been disappointed with spring growth, and then it's the added management factor that they need just to make sure that doesn't get too overgrown. Then they're dealing with bloat and stuff like that. But research from Teagasc has shown that the addition of clover to swards will improve milk yields. We have an 8-year study here in Moore Park. We're comparing grass only and grass clover swards, and the grass clover swards do have increased milk production at reduced nitrogen rates. So therefore, it's definitely a strong consideration farmers should be making.
And finally, then, if we look to, we've reseeded the paddock, and you're saying we've maybe a 60-day turnaround where people are doing it very well and the conditions are right. They're down to 42 days. When is the ideal time to go in and graze?
Yeah, again, a change of tact here. Again, we would say that the first grazing should take place when the cover is around 7 to 100 to 1,000. And ultimately, that all that is leaving a herd of cows or a group of calves or a younger stock in across the paddock and just getting it grazed off. We're not leaving it to go into 2,000, because if we do that, we'll get we'll get a lot of tillers pulled out of the ground. And the other thing I would say is we saw it last year. In dry weather, especially in the drought, we saw a lot of tillers being pulled out of the ground because the sward wasn't strong enough to withstand that pulling by the animals. So like 700 to about 1,000 in just a light grazing, and sometimes that's only half a grazing, not even half a grazing for the herd of cows, and you're off. And you can be back into that in 14 or 15 days for the second grazing. But that has huge implications in tillering out the sward for the next rotation. And ultimately, I suppose that's why we've we've pushed to a spring initiative. You go into the autumn, you can get into higher masses, poor ground conditions, not as well established wards. So, what we're trying to do is just get it tillered up, get the sward, active, growing, and I suppose into production as fast as we can.
And on that, spraying pre-grazing at 700 or 1,000 of a cover, or after?
Spraying before that, like we're looking at spraying when you're probably at 1.5 inches of a sward, which is probably 200, 300. And like what you're really spraying for there is, and we see it time and time again. We did a survey a couple of years ago. 95% of pastures are infested by docks. The only permanent way you can control a dock is at the post-emergent spray level, and that, I would say, too many farmers go in too late with spray in that post-emergence time zone. Seedling dock, that's the time to kill them, and you can kill them cheaper then. It's too late to kill them when they're established, and in fact you won't kill them.
Yeah, and I would say don't be shy about giving it a second spray if there's some seedlings coming up after that as well. Just control them from the off. John Mack yesterday had his method of controlling was about 2 to 3 weeks after sowing, go in with another bag of can, and that'll get the grass growing again. Well, grass growing, and also get the docks getting above ground as well. Then hit them with the spray, and that was one method that he used for controlling docks.
And sometimes, following on to Thomas's point, sometimes that double spray with those, and like it's fair to say where you have clover in the sward, the sprays are a little bit weaker than the likes of Pasteur or Forefront. They are lighter, so sometimes you probably have to go in with a double spray to kill those seedling docks. So, people shouldn't be afraid to do that. But this is all about timing, really.
That's great. Thank you, guys. That's it for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast. And my thanks to Micheal O'Donovan and Tomas Tubritt for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple and Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. And for more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Emma Louise Coffey, and join me next time for your Dairy Edge.